Alright, so I'm making a tube to go across the windshield dash from pillar over there to pillar over here. So from plate to plate, I've got about 46 inches. It's going to get confusing. It's going to be a little challenging to follow this, but I figured this would be a good time and a good example of kind of explaining the degrees of your angles and your measurements of what it takes to get a 25-degree bend, which is what I'm about to do. So anyways, real quickly on the Rogue bender, I have a 6-inch center line radius die, which is referring to the die right here. This is a 6-inch center line radius die. So in order to bend tubing with what I'm going to be doing right now, it's going to take 0.104 inches to make 1 degree of a bend. So in a 25-degree bend, I'm going to use 2.6 inches of tube. So I need to figure out how exactly I'm going to put all this onto a piece of tube. So you can see here I've got some markings drawn. Don't pay any attention to this mark or this mark, but this clamp line is 13 inches from the end of the tube. That reference is the distance from the center of this pressure die to where the bend is going to actually take place in the center of the clamp die, which is hidden behind that plate, to the end of the clamp. So this end of the clamp out here. Alright, so this is actually about 10 inches, but it's going to take me 2.5 inches to get a 25-degree bend. So to put this as close as I possibly can to the end of this tube without wasting a bunch of material, I want to minimize the amount of cutoff that I have here, but I want my bend to be right at the end of this tube, so it just barely, let me show you why. I need it to scoot around this dash piece right here, so I need the tube to be on the front side of this dash insert, and I just barely need it to bend around this and tie into this tube. So I'm going to try to put it as low as I possibly can, so that way I'm not blocking any vision, but also still want to utilize the defroster, but also get around this dash piece. So anyways, in order to accomplish all that, let's see if I can, there we go. Just so you kind of have an idea, I need to get from here to here in a short bend point. So in order to do that, I've got to have my bends right at the end of the tube, which unfortunately means I've got to waste some tube, which costs money. So this stuff has got to be well thought out, and you've really got to plan this. So anyways, I guess 25-degree bend, 2.6 inches. So my bend is going to start here and it's going to end here. So it's going to take that length of tube in order to complete this bend, which puts the end of my tube of where I'm going to actually cut it off at somewhere in this vicinity. So from the end of the bend here to about this point, just a rough ballpark idea. So anyways, I need to know what to do down here. That wasn't supposed to happen. So anyways, I need a 49-inch piece of tube, 49.5-inch piece of tube to get from pillar to pillar, but I've got to account for my degrees and bends, and I've got to account for my notches. So anyways, I'll get further into that here in a second, but this is my starting point at least, because this is a 10-foot stick of tube, and it's not easy to work with these things. So I really would like to cut this thing in half, but I don't want to cut it. I don't want to cut it too short or too long. Too long will be a waste of material. Too short would screw me completely, and I wouldn't be able to utilize this piece of tube. So I've got to account for the amount of bend that the space that I need to be able to accomplish my bend down here. So back to the 46 degrees, or I'm sorry, 46 inches that I was referring to from plate to plate here. So if 46 inches from that plate to that plate. That's kind of giving me a ballpark idea of where my bends will be. It's really going to be more on the 45 mark, which if I shave an inch on each side, that'd give me about 44 inches of length between the start of each bend. So I'm going to probably have about 44 inches of straight tube. So from this mark right here to where my mark will be down here, I'll have about 44 inches of straight tube. Never mind these markings. These don't correlate to this concept yet. Just kind of getting idea of lengths and measurements there. So to add to my measurements I was just giving you, something I left out is the fact that the offset from the center of this bend die to the outer edge of this clamp out here, so this outer edge right here of the clamp, is 5 7/8 inch. So that measurement right there is a known value that I transferred to here. So I'm going to clamp my tube here. So that outer edge of the clamp is going to be right on this line, and the start of my bend is going to be right here on this line. So that's 5 7/8 inches. So I didn't explain that earlier like I should have. So that's where I got these lines, or yeah, these measurements for these lines here. So that kind of helps explain the whole length and how I landed these lines on this tube. So what I did was I made sure I counted the 13 inches. So to here was 13 inches, and I knew that I needed to start here. So I measured 13 inches over from the end of the tube, made my clamp line, and then measured back 5 7/8 inches. Then I came up with the 25 degree value for the degree bend, and that's where I got my 2.6 inches. So 25 times 0.104, which is how much tubing is used on a 6-inch centerline radius die for this Rogue fabrication bender, which came up with 2.6 inches. So that's where this 2.6 inches came in. The rest of the tube is kind of an unknown factor just yet, just simply due to the fact that I haven't got that far. But anyways, I'm going to measure out 44 inches of straight tube now and get my marks going down here so I can have an idea of where I need to end this tube. So, alright, so I've been doing some deep thought on this one, and after getting a piece of tube up in here to kind of give me a reference point, got a little spacer, I put it there. I didn't have a perfect piece of tube to go from base to base over there. So anyways, I used this as kind of a reference. So anyways, I'll show you what I got going on here. So with my thought process of all this, in order to get this tube to land exactly where it's at, the degree it's going to take to get from here to here, the degree of bend, it's actually not going to be 25 degrees. I definitely miscalculated. I went from the inside to the outside, not even paying attention to what I did. So I needed to get the degree from the inside point to here, to this inside tube, but 25 degrees put me over here rather than over here. So anyways, I had to go with 40 degrees. So in order to get 40 degrees, I was going to be too far out, and it's going to end up pushing this tube too far away from where I want it to land, just because of the way that the bend is going to, it's just not going to fit. What I'm going to actually do instead is notch this tube just like this, ideally. So I'm going to bring a tube straight off of the A-pillar, and I'm going to tie this tube into this tube and utilize this as my bend point, my corner. It's actually going to strengthen things, I believe. So I'll be able to reinforce this bracket off of this tube. So I'll be able to put my strength a little bit better in there. I'm not a huge fan of this design. However, I may even end up adding a plate up along the side of this just to strengthen this up a little bit more. So I think this is what I'm going to go with instead. it seems a little bit more fitting and practical. It'll all come together a little better in the end, I believe, and land my tube tight and close to the dash, because my main concern, this can be the wife's daily driver, and I want her to still be able to have plenty of good defrost. So I want the tube to be as far up against this dash piece here as possible without actually touching it. Also have the VIN number still be visible from the outside. So I'm not trying to roll this tube any farther out this way than I have to. And if I did any sort of a bend at this point back here, a bend would push the tube out too far. So that's why I'm going this route rather than the bend. So I changed things up a bit. I still wanted to give a visual reference on this because this was something that I feel is kind of important. So you saw the 25-degree bend a little bit ago. This is a 40-degree bend. And you can see here, my measurement is now 15 inches rather than before it was 13 inches from the end of the tube. So what changed that is everything with the degree. As you can tell, I've obviously had to relocate all my markings. So all my markings from before are no longer on this tube. I just used some brake clean, erased my Sharpie markings, and started from scratch. So in all that, my calculations were off with the degrees. The 25-degree bend wasn't going to work like I thought. I miscalculated. So anyways, I had to get a 40-degree bend roughly in order to achieve the goal that I wanted with landing the tube where I needed. So anyways, it was going to play into too many other errors and too many other factors that weren't going to quite line up. So it didn't take me till after I started measuring things to realize that, after I started putting it on the tube and started seeing where everything was going to land. So since it's going to be a 4.16 inch long bend, the amount of distance the tubing would have traveled in order to make that bend even feasible was going to put me too far out. Also, it's a lot of a waste of tube to factor in this bend versus the way I'm going to go the other route. So this was going to end up using about 60 inches of tubing, whereas now I'm only going to use about 49 inches of tubing. Actually, I'm sorry, 49 and a half inches of tubing to accomplish my goal. And I think it'll still retain enough strength. So anyways, these are the kind of things you got to factor in when you're building these cages custom wise. You really want to make sure everything's going to work out for you, not only financially, but your end result, what you want it to be, as far as how you want it to look, and being tight and effective, and just being practical. You know, this is going to be a daily driver. It's not quite the beater toy that the salt shaker is. So anyways, that's kind of where I'm going with all this. I want to keep things tight. So from end of tube to the end of clamp is 15 inches. From clamp to bend beginning point is 5 7/8 inches. That factor doesn't change from the last bend. However, what did change is the 4.16 inches, because I'm bending 40 degrees and every degree is 0.104 inches. So that comes out to 4.16 inches, which gives me my length of my bend. So this line here is where the bend was going to stop, which from this point to this point alone, that is too much tube to land where I needed it to land. So again, that's why this is all changing. It's a little bit of a bummer because I like bends and tubing. However, it just wasn't going to be practical. So I got to go a different route. All right, so here's the end result. Give you a decent idea of what's going on. I will cap these off here on the ends, and I will trim those up a little bit. I'd kind of like to have it a little bit more flush there. That side down there is a little longer. But anyways, you get the straight line concept and what I was trying to accomplish, which was miss this dash piece right here. But keep it nice and low, nice and tight. Let it focus there for a second. There we go. Come on. Don't be difficult on me. There we go. All right, so I think you get the idea. It's nice and tight, nice and low. I had to get a weld there in the bottom. Man, it's being tough on me. Had to get a weld there in the bottom just so that way I could make sure I sealed up the cage. I can't be having it have any sort of leak right there. I'm still planning on doing the air system, so I didn't want any sort of air to get out, so I had to make sure that since I can't get to that point anymore with weld in the future, I had to seal it up before I finished it. So anyways, that gives you guys an idea of what I got going on with the windshield dash